Before I researched any of this, I had a pretty simple belief. I had already solved the main reason we learn languages. I mean, I use translation all the time, I can point my phone at a menu or speak into my earbuds, and it just works. So, my assumption was simple. If the hard part is already gone, language learning should be fading out too. Not tomorrow, not suddenly, but slowly in the background. That sounded obvious to me, and I even thought this video might be short. Then I checked the numbers, but they did not say what I expected. So I opened my laptop and looked for the thing I expected to find, a slow decline. Because the logic seemed obvious. Translation used to be the wall. You needed years just to order food, read a sign, or catch a joke. But now that wall is almost gone, so I thought language learning would be doing the same thing paper maps and handwriting did. Still around, still useful to a few people, but slowly disappearing in the background. That felt like the cleanest answer, so I went in looking for a proof. The first graph I opened was from Duolingo. I wasn't expecting much. Honestly, it was just for confirmation. But the graph wasn't going down, it was going up. I remember staring at it for a few seconds, thinking, wait, am I looking at the wrong data? So I checked another report, same result, and another, still growing. That didn't make any sense. If AI was removing all the language barriers, so why were people losing interest in learning languages? For a couple of days, I genuinely couldn't explain it. I thought maybe I was reading the data wrong, or asking the different question entirely. At that point, I stopped trying to prove myself right, and I started asking a different question. So I stopped looking at the market, and I started asking people, not companies, not charts, people. I wanted to know something simple. Why keep learning a language when a machine can already do the translation for you? And almost nobody answered with translation. They talked about completely different things I honestly did not expect. At first, I thought people learned languages for one simple reason, to communicate. But the more interviews I read, the more stories I listen to, the less that explanation worked. People almost never said, I wanted to learn Spanish because I want to translate better. Instead, they said things like, my partner's family only speaks Spanish, or I want to work in Germany. I don't want to feel like an outsider anymore. That's when something clicked. Translation wasn't the goal, it was only one tool. The real goal was connection, and those are not the same thing. At that point, I thought I understood the answer. People weren't learning languages because of translation. They were learning them because of connection. That already felt like a satisfying conclusion. But then, I came across a psychology paper, and it completely changed the direction of my research. Researchers gave the bilingual people the exact same moral problem. Nothing changed, except the language. When they answered in their native languages, many made one decision. But when they answered in their second language, many made a different one. Same person, same question, different language, and the decision changes. I had to read that twice. Because if changing the language changes the way you think, then learning a language isn't just learning new words. You're also learning a new way to see the world. Up to this point, I had been asking one question, can AI translate what we say? But I slowly realized that wasn't the real challenge. The real challenge was something much harder. Can AI translate what we mean? In 2017, a Palestinian man was arrested after Facebook's automatic translation misunderstood one of his posts. The original message was harmless, but the translation completely changed its meaning. One small mistake, real consequences. The story stayed with me. Not because I made a mistake, humans make mistakes too, but because it reminded me of something important. Language isn't just information. It's intention, it's emotion, it's context, and sometimes those are the hardest things to translate. At this point, I thought I finally understood the answer. Languages help us connect. That made sense. But one question is still bothering me. If AI can translate meetings, emails, and presentations, why do so many international companies still care about language skills? So I kept digging, and I realized companies are rarely paying you just to exchange information. They are paying you to build trust. Imagine you're sitting in an important meeting. You say something, AI translates it perfectly. The words are correct. But then, someone makes a joke, and everyone laughs. You smile too. But You don't really know why. A few minutes later, the conversation changes. People interrupt each other, they speak faster, they use expressions you never heard before. Technically, you understood everything, but you never truly became a part of the conversation. And that's when I realized companies don't hire language skills because people can't translate. They value them because people trust those who feel present. I noticed that almost every video I'd watch on this topic focused on what happens outside of us. At this point, my original question had almost disappeared. I wasn't asking whether AI could replace language learning anymore. I was asking something completely different. What does learning a language actually change? Better jobs, easier travel, and better communication. But very few talked about what happens inside us. I came across studies suggesting that bilingual people don't just know another language. In some situations, they think differently. They make different decisions. They sometimes even describe themselves differently, depending on the language they are speaking. That doesn't mean they become a different person, but it does mean that language is more than vocabulary. Every language carries its own history, its own culture, its own way of seeing the world. And when you learn a new language, you're not just translating your thoughts, you're expanding them. But right when I thought I had my answer, I ran into an objection I couldn't ignore. Elon Musk has said more than once that this whole conversation might be temporary, that Neuralink could eventually let us communicate brain to brain. No words, no translation, no language at all. If that ever becomes real, connection wouldn't need language anymore. Not even AI translation, just direct thoughts. And for a second, that made me question everything I'd just concluded. But then I thought about it more. Even if we could send raw thoughts directly, culture wouldn't transfer with them. A joke wouldn't suddenly make sense. Trust wouldn't build itself. Because the thing I kept finding in this research wasn't really about words. It was about the effort. The years you spend inside someone else's way of thinking. Maybe brain-to-brain communication speed up the message, but I'm not sure it speed up the belonging. So after all of this research, after all these papers, after all these stories, let's go back to the original question. Is learning a language still worth it? I don't think there's one answer anymore. If your only goal is to order food on a vacation, ask for directions, or understand a menu, AI is already incredibly good, and it's going better. But if your goal is to build a life somewhere else, to make real friends, to fall in love, to lead an international team, to understand another culture, or simply becoming a different version of yourself, then AI isn't replacing language learning. It's changing why we learn. And maybe that's what I got wrong at the beginning. I started this research thinking language learning was becoming less valuable. Instead, I realized something completely different. The easier AI makes translation, the clearer the real value of learning language becomes. Because translation was never the destination, it was just the road. Before making this video, I thought AI was making language learning less important. Now, I think it simply makes us ask a better question. Not can AI translate, but what kind of a life do I want to build? Because the answer to that question changes everything. I'd genuinely like to know what you think. If you were starting from zero, would you still spend years learning another language? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, I want to see you in the next one. Take care.